In today's topic, I will be reading from the book Enter the Zone. If you have this book, push pause, go get it, and read it while I cover this important information. Hello everyone, Jason here again, and today we'll be covering the book titled Enter the Zone by Barry Sears, PhD. It was interesting in that yesterday I met a friend I hadn't seen like in 3 months, so we were catching up. And she asked me, she says, "Hey Jason, what's the latest book you've read?" And I said, "Well, I just read Enter the Zone by Barry Sears." And she goes, "Wow." She goes, "I remember that book, reading it. It's back from the 1990s. It talks about how to balance protein, carbohydrates, and fats to enter the zone." I go, "Wow." I said, for a book being back in the 1995 when it was released, your memory's great. I was amazed by her being able to remember this information. So yeah, we talked a little bit about it, and it's like, yeah, it was a great foundational book back then of really waking people up and saying, hey, this high carb diet isn't working. It's creating all these issues, and it was a wake-up call for a lot of people, especially in the case of eating high bad carbohydrates and then the impact that it has on your insulin levels. And I told her, and I said, "Well, do you remember his discussion about eicosanoids?" And she goes, "No, I don't." I go, "Well, that's interesting, because over the past 20 years that I've been reading on health, I really haven't heard the concept of eicosanoids being brought up. And from my viewpoint, after reading the book Enter the Zone, that's the key point, the key takeaway from this book, or eicosanoids. It's almost like intentionally this concept and this topic is being kept hidden from us. Yeah, then again, eicosanoids is a key topic that needs to be brought forward again and really looked at and researched further from my viewpoint. I thought what we would do today is, he has a really good chapter, it's chapter 4, it's called Eicosanoids, the short course, and it gives just a really good summary over all of eicosanoids. And I thought I would read through most of this chapter. It's only like 4 pages long, and give commentary as I read through it. So chapter 4, Eicosanoids, the short course. If hormones such as insulin and glucagon control blood sugar, what controls hormones? The answer, eicosanoids. In fact, eicosanoids are the body's super hormones. Mysterious and fleeting, but all-powerful, eicosanoids are made by every living cell in the human body. They are the molecular glue that holds the human body together. Not only do the eicosanoids control all the body's hormonal systems, they control virtually every vital physiological function: the cardiovascular system, the immune system, the central nervous system, the reproductive system, and so on. So this is huge. Basically, all the hormones in our body are controlled by eicosanoids. And that's why this is so key, is that, okay, if we have a hormonal imbalance, which I think all of us are especially aware of the insulin and all the talk about diabetes, hypoglycemia nowadays, etc., how do we get this under control? Continuing with the book. When you get right down to it, eicosanoids are in charge of nothing less than keeping us alive and well. Without eicosanoids, life as we know it would be impossible. The eicosanoid family includes a wide variety of superhormones with tongue-twisting names: prostaglandins, thromboxanes, leukotrienes, and hydroxylated fatty acids. I'll talk about these hormone groups and their effects on disease in more detail later on. For the moment, just remember that eicosanoids are the most powerful biological agents known to man. Control eicosanoids and you'll open the door to the zone. Let's continue. Yet despite the crucial role eicosanoids play in maintaining life and health, they remain all but unknown. Your doctor has probably never heard of them. You can go to any medical school in the country, walk down the hallways, and ask any of the professors if they've ever heard of eicosanoids. After a blank stare, the answer is usually no. This ignorance of eicosanoids in the medical community is amazing. The fact is that early discoveries in eicosanoid research won the 1982 Nobel Prize for Medicine. And the most powerful drugs in any medicine chest are designed to affect the level of eicosanoids in the body. For instance, he said in the medicine chest, well, aspirin do this. And so, he says it's amazing that it hasn't brought out. Well, I think there's another agenda going on here. And he kind of brushes over it, but there's another agenda that our whole health industry, the pharmaceutical industry, is all based upon profit. If they let this information come out to the masses, this will basically empower us to take control of our own health. There's no profit in that. So I would state that there's another agenda behind this. There's a profit agenda that is keeping this concept of eicosanoids being really vetted out and given to the people. Let's continue on. It was only with the advent of more sophisticated instrumentation in the mid-1970s that eicosanoids could be studied for the first time. Since then, there has been an explosion of knowledge, at least at the scientific research level, a continuing revelation as to how ubiquitous and powerful these hormones really are. Yeah, he continues on. I'll pass through some of this. And let's go to the last paragraph here in this part of the chapter. All these eicosanoids operate at the level of the individual cell, and they have exceptionally diverse and powerful effects. In fact, the eicosanoids can be seen as the ultimate regulators of cellular function, turning cells on and off on a second-by-second basis, like fireflies lighting up a hot July evening. Okay. The next section is titled Good and Bad Eicosanoids. Like all hormones, eicosanoids operate as control systems. But like insulin and glucagon, eicosanoids also have opposing actions. Since eicosanoids are the most powerful of all hormone systems, a balance of these opposing actions spells good health, and an imbalance spells disease. So in effect, eicosanoids are your body's ultimate cellular check and balance system. There's an even simpler way to put this. Some eicosanoids are bad, some are good. Of course, no natural substance is entirely good or entirely bad. As an example, take cholesterol. Doctors like to describe different varieties of cholesterol with the terms good, which is HDL, and bad, which is LDL, low-density lipoproteins. Well, as I said, there's no absolute good and there's no absolute bad in human physiology. Low-density lipoproteins, the carriers of bad cholesterol, are the molecular delivery trucks that transport the lipids, such as essential fatty acids and cholesterol, critical for cell growth. Without this bad cholesterol, you would die. If it's when the balance of good and bad cholesterol becomes disturbed that the probability of cardiovascular trouble lurks ahead. Another example, since we're talking about hormones, is insulin. As we saw in the previous chapter, too much insulin spells hypoglycemia. Too little means diabetes. The bottom line, nature loves balance. And too much of a good thing or too little of a bad thing can in the end be bad. This is totally relatable to my own experience. I have, in the past, I was diagnosed with having hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, and so I've had to work with that. How can I come to terms with that in my own body? And really, it ties right into this book where I found if I balance the protein and the carbs and the fat in my diet to what works for me, that the hypoglycemia would be in control. It would no longer control me, which was awesome. Continuing with the book, the same is true of good and bad eicosanoids. But the psychological states are even higher because paracrine hormones, like eicosanoids, are much more powerful than endocrine hormones like insulin and glucagon. Let's take platelet aggregation as an example. Platelet aggregation is simply a fancy term for the tendency of a type of blood cell known as platelets to join together to form clumps. Good eicosanoids prevent platelets from clumping or aggregating. Bad eicosanoids promote their clumping. When platelets clump together at the wrong time, you can develop a blood clot that may lead to a heart attack or stroke. But if you cut yourself, you want platelets to clump because that's what will eventually stop your bleeding. Too little of the bad eicosanoids and you would bleed to death. And then again, in my life, I can totally relate this. My dad, he has the issue of his blood coagulating too much. In other words, he has to take a blood thinner because he has an imbalance of his eicosanoids. And my dad has his own life, but it would be great if I could get him to read this book and tweak his diet, because basically we can empower ourselves to overcome these conditions. Right now, he has chosen to take a blood thinner that he has to pay for, and I'm not for sure what the price is, but I'm sure it's a hefty price that he has to pay yearly to take this blood thinner constantly. Continuing, the same is true of blood pressure. Too many bad eicosanoids induce high blood pressure by causing constriction of the arteries. Too many good eicosanoids induce low blood pressure, which can lead to shock. Just amazing. Then again, my mom, she has high blood pressure, and all it has to do with is to balance your eicosanoids. And we'll get to that as we get to the end of the chapter here. What's true for platelet aggregation and blood pressure is also true for pain, inflammation, the immune system, on and on. An imbalance of good and bad eicosanoids means disease. When I think about this inflammation, so many people have arthritis. And all it boils down to is your balance between bad and good eicosanoids. And through your food, you can easily take command of that, empower yourself, and no longer have to have that disease, which, because of your each one of us has a different genetical makeup, and so we're susceptible to different diseases. I know that was one really, I was fascinated by the story of this author. He's basically a past MIT researcher, so very scientific, and in his family, he has a history of heart disease, and the males all of them died before they're 55. And he began to develop heart disease, and so he had a vested interest. And so he tried all the research routes, tried to find that pill he could take, and eventually it just comes down to food. And that's how he came up with this system that works for him and other people, that has helped him then to extend his life and reverse that susceptibility in his DNA to heart disease. A great story. Let's continue. Eicosanoids, disease, and wellness is the heading of the next section. When the 1982 Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded for eicosanoid research, it gave rise to a new and different perspective on disease. Using this new paradigm, we can link many, if not all, disease states in a new and unified picture. Virtually every disease state, whether it be heart disease, cancer, or autoimmune diseases like arthritis and MS, can be viewed at the molecular level as the body simply making more bad eicosanoids and fewer good ones. For some people, that imbalance could mean heart disease. For others, cancer, arthritis, or obesity. And again, it all depends upon your genes, your DNA, your genetics. If we turn that around, we'll see that redefining disease in terms of good and bad eicosanoids means that for the first time in medical history, there is a simple but elegant molecular definition of wellness. The body making more good and fewer bad eicosanoids. Well put. Next section is wellness versus optimal health. Most of us define wellness as simply not being ill. The vast majority of people in America today may not be overtly ill, but they are definitely not feeling their best. Optimal health, the metabolic state in which the body and mind function at peak efficiency, goes beyond mere wellness. Optimal health is the state that all of us would like to reach. And then again, I can relate to this with hypoglycemia. When I started tweaking my diet, and between the fat, the carbs, and the proteins, when I would get it right, it was just like, wow. For the next 4 hours after that meal, I would just be, the mental clarity, the focus that I had was incredible. I was in the zone, and it feels great. And then, I'm in a hurry. The next meal, it's like, it was an imbalance, and boom. After an hour or an hour and a half after eating, low blood sugar, boom, I get that low. And even though, most people wouldn't see that as, they wouldn't notice I have an illness, I was dealing with it internally and just in my productivity in my life. And the latest study that I saw, 83% of Americans have blood sugar issues. In other words, they're not in balance. And you think about that, 83% of Americans are not at their optimal health just in looking at their blood sugar levels, let alone all the other physiological systems we have in our body. Let's continue. Optimal health requires a balance of good and bad eicosanoids. As I said earlier, you must have some bad eicosanoids to survive, just as you have to have some bad cholesterol to survive. So to achieve optimal health, the metabolic state you're after is the state in which the dynamic balance of good and bad eicosanoids is favorable. This is the molecular definition of the zone. Then again, to achieve optimal health, the metabolic state you're after is the state in which the dynamic balance of good and bad eicosanoids is favorable. This is the molecular definition of the zone. What will the zone, the state of optimal health, get you? Even if you're not ill, it will help prevent the likelihood of disease. Many chronic disease conditions, such as obesity, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, depression, and alcoholism, have a strong genetic linkage. The potential for their expression lies buried in your genetic code. In the zone, you dramatically decrease the likelihood that those genes will be expressed. That's huge. It means that this empowers each one of us. It's we have these genes. We each have our own genes and our own particular weakness to a specific disease. But by just balancing our bad and good eicosanoids, we can take control of this and have optimal health. It's amazing. And the research definitely needs to continue on eicosanoids and how to further take control of each set of eicosanoids throughout our body. The further you are from the zone, the more likely those genes will be expressed. More immediate, in the zone, you'll have greater access to stored body fat instead of stored carbohydrate for energy. You'll also benefit from greater mental concentration, which will not only help you be more productive, but will improve your physical performance as well. Who could turn down the chance to reap these incredible benefits? The next section, food, eicosanoids, and the zone. Whether you want to move from illness to wellness or beyond wellness to optimal health, your only pathway is through the zone. How do you get to the zone in the first place? It's amazingly simple. Through the food you eat. It's worth saying again, if you follow a zone-favorable diet, it will get you to the zone and keep you there for the rest of your life. And I know from my own experience, he's right on. then again, I think each one of us is unique and we need to figure out how to get there. And like I said, this was written, I think this was published in like 1995. He sets a great foundation. And then how has that been built upon through the new research? For instance, covering the wheat belly, we learned that grains overall were not meant for human consumption. Our bodies grains create a chemical imbalance within our bodies. Grains were meant to be eaten by cows, by sheep, and horses. They weren't meant for human consumption, and therefore, when we overdo it with grains, it leads to disease within our body. Let's continue. What is a zone favorable diet? It's a diet in which the balance of macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, and fat, is tightly controlled. Every meal, every snack, every day. What does the macronutrient balance have to do with eicosanoids? First of all, dietary fat is the only source of the essential fatty acids that are the chemical building blocks for all eicosanoids. So basically what this is saying, first of all, you have to take care and have healthy eicosanoids in your body. And to do that, you need the essential fatty acids. In this case, eating salmon, taking like a good quality fish oil or krill oil will get you those essential fatty acids that your body needs to have healthy eicosanoid production within your body. Meanwhile, the balance of protein and carbohydrate controls the insulin-glucagon axis, which in turn determines whether the eicosanoids your body makes are good or bad. Pretty simple, actually. Think of the body as a biological pinball machine. The pinballs, the essential fatty acids, are constantly being put into play by the plunger, the fat you eat at every meal. Whether the ball remains in play, making good eicosanoids, or end up in the well, making bad eicosanoids, depends upon how well you handle the flippers on the side of the machine. Those flippers are the combination of macronutrients in every meal and snack you eat, which then again is protein, carbs, and fat. Whether you know it or not, you play the eicosanoid game every 4 to 6 hours every day of your life. The better you play the game, the better the results, the more likely that you'll reach the zone. If you're consuming a diet that is too rich in carbohydrates, the same high carbohydrate diet that is recommended for every cardiovascular patient, every athlete, and everyone else in America, then you're playing the game badly. Actually, you're doing everything in your power to make more bad eicosanoids. Why? Because you are causing an overproduction of insulin, and the resulting production of bad eicosanoids keeps your blood sugar levels out of whack. This denies you access to your stored body fat and ultimately leads to disease. Excess carbohydrates will drive you out of the zone. And I would extend that to protein and fats, that anything eaten in excess is going to create an imbalance. And I think it also depends upon your genetics. Some people can handle, for whatever reason, they can handle more carbs, and other people can handle more of a diet that's higher in protein. And that's something that I think needs to be researched more. And I think in the next book that I plan on reading, we'll get more into that. It's about the blood types. So interesting to delve into that more. Continuing. So if you've been eating a high carbohydrate diet and you find yourself getting more fatigued with less physical energy and more body fat, now you know why. You've been playing the eicosanoid game poorly, and that poor play has short-circuited the basic control mechanisms, the eicosanoids, that have evolved over the last 500 million years to assess your own stored body fat and maintain blood sugar levels. How do I know that playing the macronutrient game well, that is, eating a zone-favorable diet, will confirm these benefits? I've tested it in heart patients, diabetics, overweight people, people with autoimmune diseases, even victims of HIV. But perhaps the most convincing tests were the ones I conducted in the best living laboratory of all, the bodies of world-class athletes. Yeah, he talks about world-class athletes in the book, and he goes through some of the success stories that he's had, where he's taken a set of athletes, whether it be professional basketball team, etc., And once he puts them on a zone, how just their performance has just gone to the next level and has allowed them to excel and be successful as a team. Well, that concludes the chapter on eicosanoids. Then again, I truly believe this is an area, a key concept that needs to be looked at further. We're all aware of the insulin-glucagon axis and how that impacts our body and how to gain control of that through the ratio or the balance between protein and carbs. And I'm further interested in understanding, well, what about all of our other systems? For instance, like my dad has arthritis. My mom has been dealing with a heart condition. And those hormones, what other tweaks can we make to our diet, and what other factors play into this that prevent us from having that optimal balance between bad and good eicosanoids. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this time, and looking forward to the next video.